All right, Quintin, this is episode number 6 of the Nervous System Training Podcast. So we've got some questions we'll run through today. Anyone who's watching, listening, like, comment, subscribe, of course, and leave your questions in the comments or send them to Nervous System Training Podcast at gmail.com or Nervous System Training Podcast on Instagram. We'll incorporate them as best we can. All right, I wanted to start today talking a little bit about the nervous system training equipment. You have a cool analogy about the SuperCat. First of all, can you explain what the SuperCat is, how it's different from normal squats, how it fits into nervous system training, and then we'll get into the history of it a little bit from there.
Okay. So the SuperCat is actually a really interesting sort of concept. And is there any way we can pull up like an image or like a video of like the SuperCat while I'm kind of going through it?
Yeah, I'll pull that up.
Yeah, if you just put on YouTube SuperCat, you'll come across some stuff. All right, so when it comes to utilizing the SuperCat, this is something Marv started to incorporate somewhere in the early 2000s, and I believe he was introduced to the SuperCat by a gentleman. I don't know his real name, but he calls himself the Dunk Master. And he was like really big into, plyometric training, stretch shortening, cycle activation. And I don't know how they met, but I guess they worked together sometime in California. And when Marv started working with this SuperCat machine, this really was a game changer for his application on training the nervous system. Oh, there's a good machine. So this is how it's usually designed to be used, right? You have a machine that has an arm, so it has like a lever that goes on the athlete, and it runs on a 2-to-1 chain crank. So you got two small gears that are fed to two independent chains, and one large gear that's connected to a chain that goes into the arm. You can kind of see it like across like the profile in front of the athlete. And that follows a swing system that connects to a bottom carriage that holds the weight. Now, the thing about what makes this machine so effective, unlike, say, like bars or other machines that look similar, but maybe the loading plates are on the side of the arms, is that puts a lot of the force vector directly on the athlete. And with this system, as soon as the athlete hits the ground, a huge amount of the force starts to dissipate just because of like the design of the leverage, and it doesn't exactly like all shear through the athlete. The machine sort of absorbs a lot of the kinetic energy, right? You load it up from the back, and there's a bunch of different ways to use this. Now, the company that made this machine was called Powernetics. And I don't know if they made the first design. I believe they do. They're out of Texas, and they actually went out of business during COVID. And so right now there's one or two other companies that make a machine that's basically the exact same clone. It's a lot more expensive, and they're really difficult to get a hold of because like the shipping cost is just insane. Like I remember I was trying to order one. It was like a $2,400 machine on top of like $600 like shipping. And I was like, oh my God, because it's made of steel. And it's a pretty cumbersome machine to move around. You got to kind of understand, like work with it a little bit to transport it around. But the good thing, despite its price, you'll probably balance out around the same sort of price if you were to invest in like a heavy duty squat rack from Rogue. Because this machine can do everything that your barbell can do and more. So is there any way we could find like the SuperCat in use by, say, like Marv Marinovich or okay, go third image over, the third short over what we're looking at. Yeah. So if you look, here's a guy. Actually, this guy's from Canada. I've talked to this guy a few times. He was at a seminar with Nick Curson. And how Marv decided to use this machine is that he realized that this arm, when it's loaded, actually creates a very low impact shock onto the limbs, which could directly activate the stretch shortening cycle. And so he applied a slant at the bottom of the SuperCat, which will force athletes to be more on the forefoot, and it creates a better angle of leverage with the arm. And he started really experimenting with it, inverting the athletes. Like this is one of like probably the most impressive uses of the SuperCat, where You can put a stability ball under the athlete's hips so they can absorb the impact. You don't want something really solid because that could be very compressing and it could kind of shut down biomechanics the way they want to move freely. So a stability ball is really nice and easy on the pelvis and lower back. And what you're seeing is the athlete has two 10-pound plates, so it's about 20 pounds. Now, every time the athlete throws that arm up, when he throws it up, because there's that chain crank system, that 2-to-1, that the upwards force, concentric force, is always lighter than the eccentric force coming down. So automatically it's eccentric dominant, which is great for muscular equilibrium. You know, getting the agonist and antagonist muscle groups to start working together properly and avoid overdeveloping a certain muscle group. Secondly, is that you can, like inverting the athlete, flipping them upside down, you get a greater coordination out of the limb. Like, so the leg will learn coordination and understanding of movements while you have weight off the spine. It frees up a lot of energy. And this also is a way to train the stretch shortening cycle with lower impact to expand the training volume, the athlete's training capacity in a given session. So say, unlike doing like single leg jumps or double leg jumps, right? That can be very taxing on the body. You can only get so many jumps. It's a lot of impact. It's a lot of shearing forces, which has a lot of benefit in sports performance, but you're only going to be able to do so much in one day, right? You can't do multiple sets of like 40 to 50 jumps in a day. Like, you're going to wear down the tendons. You're going to develop jumper's knee or something. But with the SuperCat, because it's lower impact, but it's enough force to get the stretch shortening cycle activated, so you can hyper train that stretch shortening, the ability to absorb and release that kinetic energy. So instead of just settling with a day where we do 2 sets of 8 to 12 jumps, now we can do 3 sets of 20 to 40 throws. So now we're enhancing the mechanism without overtaxing the amount of impact that's done on the joints. And you imagine, so like another way to look at this, imagine like doing your jump training like on a mattress or a trampoline, right? You can get a lot more jumps out of it because it's a lot more forgiving on your body. You know, but it's just hard enough, it's just firm enough for the stretch shortening cycle can still activate. And I actually I was sent this thing called a sand dune stepper by another strength coach. He sent it to me for free, wanted me to work with it. And holding on to like the wall or some poles, you know, we did like some basic jump training with it, and we were able to get like 15, 20, 25 jumps using this soft memory foam sand dune stepper. And that's when I kind of clicked. I'm like, oh, okay, like this is also the same application with the SuperCat. We're able to get more training volume with less pointed diminishing return. Now, kind of going in deeper with the SuperCat, what makes this machine so interesting, let's see if we can find another video where they're doing upper body, is that you can do all sort, like the train application is very versatile. You can do there you go, there's the guy you can do upper body throws, you can do shoulder throws, you can do biceps, you can do chest, you can do hip extension. You can find all these different ways to plyometrically train the body, right? And you can also do different stances. You can do it seated, you could do it standing, you can do 1 foot on the board, 1 foot on the ground. You can do like alternating jumps where 1 foot's on the board, 1's on the ground, and you jump up laterally, trade your feet, and land on the ground again. That's something I like to really do with my hockey players. So you just get, like, you're only limited to your creativity with using this machine. Now, you can do the same kind of work with, say, like medicine balls, right? But medicine balls, you have to coordinate. You need a partner. You know, it doesn't land into the hands as easily, which isn't necessarily bad, but it can slow down the rate of force development and the training tempo. So with this guy, he's working at kind of like a slower tempo. Let's go to Speed of Sports YouTube page. We can pull up some videos of really, really high tempos. And what I mean by tempo is how quickly the throws are being done. Like, this is a tempo, right? But with the machine, you can start to hyper accelerate the tempo. Yeah, so if we click on him and we go to his shorts, he should have some interesting videos. So are those all the shorts you can find? Click his videos. Let's kind of explore. Actually, click the RDA one, the fight for goes down as the very last one. So here you can see Nick actually is throwing the machine down, and he's speeding up the tempo of the movement. He's forcing the nervous system to release and recalibrate, to reabsorb, right? And so you can really hyper accelerate the stretch shortening cycle in a way that's safe and that's lower impact on the body. You know, and you can really get the athlete moving. It's basically like doing plyometrics downhill. You force the nervous system to keep up with the machine, which in turn teaches the body to fire at a higher speed. And once the nervous system experiences that new speed, it has that coded into its body forever. And now you're forever faster because your body readapted. So
that's really cool. I know that sprinters do that for their training when they're like Olympic sprinters will run downhill just to train faster strides. And obviously, when you adjust, and they'll do both. They'll sprint uphill to train the strength, and then they'll sprint downhill to train the speed, and then obviously try to bring it together for competition.
Right. It's called Overspeed. And so you can apply overspeeding training philosophies to the SuperCat. And that's a great thing. Like, you can take any training philosophy, any purpose, any part of the strength velocity curve where you got like maximal strength, 1 rep max, you got speed strength speed, overspeed, speed training. You can take all of those different types of velocities and you can train them all on one machine with just the changing of the load, the changing of the tempo. So like, for example, these are leg throws. If you were to take these leg throws, right, and if we were to load it at something pretty heavy, where the exchange is a little slower than what you're seeing now when he's doing his leg throws. So let's say we go like really, really heavy on this. So they're not going to be quite at the speed of sport. They're going to be more at strength speed. Overemphasis on strength, like kind of running uphill. Higher on the strength side, slower on the speed side. Now all you have to do is, if we need more speed strength, just take off the load, speed up the tempo, throw that carriage back down on the athlete. Now, with minimal setup time, quickly just changing a couple loads and understanding the proper velocities, now we're hitting an entirely different part of the force velocity curve, all in one training session. There's no need to go find a hill or use bands or anything like that. Like, it's all there ready for you. And then we can take it even further. Maybe we want to go into overspeed. Let's reduce the load even more, take off another 10 pounds. Now we're going to put a band on the SuperCat arm while I'm throwing it down, and now I'm really throwing the machine down. I'll try to go like 3 times as fast as what you're seeing with those leg throws. And now we're reaching overspeed. So if the athlete is really powerful, really strong, say like an NFL player or something, but they need just more speed, they have enough strength, just change the load, change the tempo, we can target exactly what they want. So the SuperCat is very customizable and very adaptable to whatever. So you can train multiple athletes in a single training session that all have different types of requirements or different goals. And if you know what you're doing, you know what you're looking for, you can just reshape the modality. One athlete does it this way, the other athlete does it that way. So it just makes life so much easier as a trainer to have this machine. Not only that, is that you can, let's go to Sports Science Lab. Let's go to Dominick Cruz, Sports Science Lab. Because this machine is also phenomenal for physical therapy and neuromuscular redevelopment. So we search the videos. We scroll down, we should see Dominick Cruz right there with, you see, that one. So Dominick Cruz really utilized this machine for his rehab. Now, the great thing about this machine is you can do manual loading, customizable loading on the athlete, and you'll see that. So go for like another 60 seconds because there's a little bit of explanation we got to skip through. Keep going. All right, go back. Start right there. So you can see, you can see how the trainer is manually loading. So it's really heavy, but you can reach the very threshold of the athlete's strength capacity with this machine according to how it feels for you. You can hit that perfect spot where it's not too heavy, but it's not too light. It's just what the athlete needs to get the necessary improvements. And you can also do manual pressure loading. You can do overcoming isometrics. You can do resisting isometrics. You can do all sorts of different things just by simply modifying the modality. So you don't need to get like a new bar, re-rack the plates, set up all that stuff. You don't have to put it on the athlete's back, and they kind of have to like, struggle and balance, and maybe they can't take the load, so we got to try again. Like, you waste so much goddamn time with barbells. Like, it's insane the amount of time you waste, and you only have this athlete for a couple hours. If you're lucky, you got him for a 2-hour session. If you're lucky, not every athlete has that time in their schedule. So we need to fit in everything that we can safely and effectively to get this athlete to where we want him to be. And with the SuperCat, all of a sudden, like, it just expands the possibilities. It really just hyper accelerates the efficiency of your training session. And and go back to where we were previously. We'll kind of keep looping this through. Yeah, but like right there's fine. So it kind of goes into, so this is Gavin McMillan. He worked with Mark Ranovich for a really long time. He runs a gym called Sports Science Lab. And Gavin worked with Dominick Cruz because Dominick Cruz needed help on his ACL rehab. This is a different machine. This is the isokinetic accelerator. We can get into that a little bit later. But what we're doing is, because when it comes to sports action, you need tendon strength. You need tendon elasticity. You need blood flow into the tendons, especially for rehab. And it's really hard to get nice, good eccentric pressure with barbells, right? Because the goddamn thing is on their spine. You can't like get behind them and push the bar down. It feels like shit. It's going to throw the athlete off balance. They have all these variables that they have to compromise with in order to get the necessary stimulus. With this, see how he's like really pushing that eccentric pressure, really getting the blood flow and the lengthening of that new ACL tendon, which is going to make the fibrous matrix so much stronger and pliable and more resistant, with that kind of training stimulus. And you can just like, hey, we need a little bit more quad. Perfect. Let's just put your forefoot on the pad. We need a little bit more posterior part of the leg. Okay, let's put more of the heel on the pad. We need more stuff on the lateral part. Okay, great. So I'm just going to take the left leg and I'm going to cross it over like this, and I'm just going to do single legs. I'm going to hit more of the outside of the foot. Like, we can do all that, like one set after another set after another set, hitting all these complex angles, getting all this training stimulus in a fashion that's exactly what the body needs for sports, without fucking around with barbells. Like, I'm sorry if I'm getting a little emotional, but it drives me crazy that people's identities are so attached to these barbells. And it's like, guys, we don't use muskets anymore. The barbell is old as shit. It's like, what, 100 years old or something crazy? They had barbells on the fucking Titanic? Like, what are we doing? Like, let's update this shit. Like, why are we... No army goes to war with old guns. Like, you go... Yeah. Like, we go to war with new M4s. New shit. More effective, more efficient tools to get the job done. And we're so stuck in this athletic dark age where we're just like, do you listen to like Warhammer 40K or anything like that? You heard of that before?
I don't know that one.
Okay, for my nerds out there, that there's like this fantasy board game / video game series called Warhammer, and it's in the distant future, and they're so obsessed with war and they're so primitive with their dark age that they never advance technology. They've just been making the same shit for hundreds of thousands of years. And we actually had that in real human history. Look at the sword, look at armor. Like during like the like that's why they call it the Renaissance, because that's actually when innovation started. But there was a time where even the Romans, they were using the same tech for 1,000 years, never going forward, never going backwards, just looping. And right now, that's where we're stuck with the sports performance world. We're just looping. Now, you do see some innovations showing up. Like, you see, like, these weird, like, wobbly barbells that some athletes would utilize, right? So what that is trying to do is that's trying to overemphasize on eccentric load with velocity to try to get a stretch-shortening response out of the muscle to snap it back up. But it's not ballistic. You can't release it. Because if you release the bar, you got to catch that fucker again, right? and that slows down tempo. Now you can make the argument, oh, we're working more hand-eye coordination with, okay, that's great, but you're not maximizing the stimulus. You're not hitting the capacity you could have. So you're leaving like 25% of velocity gains on the table. But the point of that rant is that that sports performance, they're trying to figure it out. Like they're trying to come up with this answer. When the SuperCat was invented fucking 20 years ago, the answer's already there. And this brings me to my piano analogy, right?
Yeah.
So the piano was developed by this musician from Italy in 1700. Like the year 1700, he invented this thing, right? The piano. And for 50 goddamn years, no one was using it. No one was working with it. No one was playing it. No professional composers were applying music theory to it. It was just collecting dust. It wasn't doing nothing. No one in society was embracing it. And the guy died in like 1730, the inventor of the piano. And so another 20 years came by is when really high-level music composers started to really looking into this new form of instrument, this piano. They started modifying it. They expanded upon the keys, and then all of a sudden they realized, holy shit, this totally changes all of music theory forever. And it became the centerpiece to all classical music for like 300 goddamn years. Like Beethoven, Mozart, like it changed the way we understood emotional expression and music forever. Without the piano, we never would have had the guitar. We never would have had the complexity of drumming. Because the piano is able to do harmony, rhythm, tempo, beat, all in one. Because you have all these different fingers working for you. But the society wasn't ready for it. It was too far ahead of its time, and it did nothing. I believe the SuperCat is the exact same scenario. Where you see a lot of people who think it's cool, or honestly, there are actually some sports scientists that I used to talk to on Instagram. I'd be like, hey, check this out. Like, what do you think of this? They're like, doesn't really look like much. And I'm like, what? Doesn't look like much? Like, I couldn't accept it. And then as I've grown wiser and I've gotten a little older and I kind of understand how people work, is that one, some people just can't see it because it happens so fast they don't know what they're looking for. And number two, it could be so far ahead of their capacity of understanding that they're not ready to absorb it. It's too different. It's too far from the traditional. It hits the edge of chaos and order too much for them. And this is an ongoing struggle throughout the human race. Like, have you ever seen the show Mindhunter?
Actually, I did.
On Netflix? Yeah. Fucking great show. Such a good show. Now, Mindhunter is about it's a fictional storytelling show based on like factual events, where the FBI was starting to use psychology and behavioral analysis to try to figure out why people are killing in a sequence. And they called them sequence killers. Eventually, that evolved into serial killers. And when some of these FBI agents were trying to present these ideas and they're trying to teach other cops, all these other police officers like, get the fuck out of here. It's like, you're trying to tell me that we're going to use psychology to figure out the criminal mind? Like, sounds like a bunch of bullshit. Right? And now it literally is this, it's the foundation for all criminal psychology, for evidential research, CSI. Now it's a whole cultural phenomenon, to help us reduce, homicides. On collecting evidence, on forensic analysis, data sampling, behavioral psychology, like all these. But the point is when they were first talking about it, law enforcement, the FBI, all the bureaucracies and structures thought it was a bunch of bullshit, and they wouldn't listen for years. Yeah, are you seeing the pattern?
Yeah. Going back to your piano analogy, and I like that a lot. I'm pretty sure the full name of piano is pianoforte, which means soft, loud, and before the piano there was the harpsichord, which visually looks pretty similar. You've got all the keys and they all represent notes the same way the piano does. But what the piano does differently is that if you press a key softly, it's a soft note.
Yes.
If you press it hard, it's a loud note. And so that kind of gets to what you're saying. Like,
yes.
Like once musicians found that, then they realized, oh, we've got this whole different access to kind of express emotion,
Yes.
And that so just you've already kind of mentioned it, but just to clarify, what is that axis with the SuperCat specifically that's missing on the barbell?
Manual pressure loading. Like manual pressure loading, like fuck every machine ever. Manual pressure loading is the ultimate. Because like say for example, because it's the most precise. So let's say if you like you, Jake, let's say if we were working together and you have a serious issue with your hip, your lateral movement's just off, right? Or maybe you're always going right and you don't really like to go left. And for basketball, you know, like your left-handed drive is a weak point, and if a defensive player figures that out, they're going to force you left, and your mechanics break down. It's a hole in your game. So I'm going to test the strength of your hips. I'm going to have you lay on your side. You abduct one leg. I'm going to push my hand on it. That's manual pressure loading. And I'll do one side, feel the other side. Oh, okay, this left side is actually significantly weaker. This is what's going on. This is a part of the puzzle. So instead of like putting on like an ankle weight and having you just do reps until it's burning, we can do an overcoming isometric or a resisting isometric, and I can push down as hard as I need to reach your maximum threshold of stability, your maximum threshold of isometric strength, customized to you. Mm-hmm. So that means in one session, we can get more out of maybe 5 sessions of the traditional physical therapy ideas. Yeah. Are you seeing how, like, so now we can take that same manual loading prep, now we can apply it to a machine where the coach can use his own intuition, his own understanding, and try to find different points in the kinetic chain, try to strengthen these areas. Do we need to plyometrically strengthen it? Isometrically, does it need to be an overcoming? Does it need to be a resisting? You know, so just like the piano, we can use soft pressure and hard pressure. We can use fast tempo. We can use slow tempo. We can literally customize the strength expression according to what the athlete needs, based on what the coach is feeling through the machine. Is that trippy?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've only ever seen one, and it actually wasn't a SuperCat. It was like a smaller version. I forget specifically what it was called, but it's at a jiu-jitsu gym in Baltimore called Form Jiu-Jitsu.
You got to steal that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, like right now I'm in Nashville. I don't know any gyms around here that have a SuperCat. If it's hard to find one, which for a lot of people it's going to be, what are some ways that you can kind of mimic some of the SuperCat abilities or capabilities without actually having access?
It's really hard. You can. So what I have come up with for my online training program, because SuperCats are really hard to come by, is you can do like resisting or overcoming isometrics with traditional strength machines. You know, because you have more like leverage points. It's safer. You can do like the 3 positions, like a 10-second hold, 10-second hold, 10-second hold sort of deal. And that's what we come up with, using leg presses, or you could use barbells, you know, to mimic it, but you're limited, right? It's not quite the same. The unfortunate answer is there's nothing that truly compares. Not that I've come across. So you go ahead.
Like I've put bands on a barbell attached to the ground. Some barbell racks have kind of pegs at the bottom. That's the closest I've gotten. But it's still not quite the same. There's more tension at the top than there is at the bottom. Which is good. It allows you to explode off the bottom a little bit better, but it's not the same as
and if you look at this, like say like here's the pads at the end, here's like the athlete's head, like it goes like over the athlete and the head fits through the center. Mm-hmm. So if you look at this point, like if you're using a bar, all the leverage is right here on the athlete, and it's compressing leverage because the bar doesn't move. So you have to compress against it, right? And you'll feel that if you ever do, like, because sometimes I'll do some hypertrophy, like I'll fuck around, you know, get like a little bit of a pump in my chest, like I'm not going to get into the UFC, and I'll use the SuperCat and I'll just do like reps to failure. But the thing is, when you're using a tool that's has a little bit more movements, where it's more eccentric based, and you're also grabbing something that's a little softer on the hands, and then you go to a bench press and you feel the difference, you realize like, holy shit, like when you grab that bar and you bench, it is so tight on the muscle because you're compressed. You're forcing the sarcomere to go like this and to try to expand like this. Unlike the SuperCat, you can create that compression, but you can also lengthen it and recompress it. It's a totally different feel on the body. Like, it's so hard to describe. You have to kind of go through it yourself. Once you use that machine, or if you ever get one, you'll never go back to a barbell. You'd be like, it's just so, like, you realize how inefficient that tool is. Not only that, if you want to try to duplicate it with a bar, you got to hit all these weird positions. These leg positions that are never show up in sports. You can't load out, you can't forefoot load, because like, now I've seen some guys who have gotten better at manipulating bars, where they'll have like the bar on the rack, they'll put it on their back, and they'll try to like do like a driving position right out of their legs. That's better. Or they'll use a wall, right? But it's just not the same. It's a totally different feel, and you can't isolate certain limbs as specifically. And
Yeah.
you just get so much more creative freedom and so much more precision with that machine.
All right, I wanted to talk about the slanted walls in some of the new grappling tournaments and karate combat, but to kind of segue into that from the SuperCat, a lot of the machines have that slanted, the slanted bottom that you're pushing from. I'll try to pull up a video, but what are the dynamics of pushing off of a slanted platform?
In what direction?
I'll pull up one of these. You're basically facing uphill.
Okay. So like, let's say if I was doing something like like sprinting up an incline, like what are the benefits of having that incline under my feet? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, like pull this up. Like here, we've got that slanted platform. Obviously, he's laying and he's kind of leveled it out with the yoga ball. But if he was standing facing the weights, like a normal squat would be,
right.
What's emphasized by that slant, and how does that mimic athletic, or how does that contribute to athletic performance gain?
Well, it forces the forefoot. It forces forefoot engagement. That's like and it creates a better vector of leverage of where the arm swings into. So you're kind of taking the athlete and you're tilting them like this, right? And the arm swings down like this. If we were straight up, it hits it okay, but it's not quite the same. And you can position yourself differently on the slant board. Like, you can bring your feet all the way up the slant board, hits more posterior. You can bring it further down, hits more anterior. But it forces posterior engagement through forefoot engagement simultaneously, depending on where you position the feet on the board. And sports is always done on the forefoot. Like, the forefoot's the gas, the heel's the brake. Like, we've learned that watching Looney Tunes. Whenever they stop, they'd like skid their heels into the ground. So most strength applications, you can't get that kind of dynamic foot position because you have to balance the damn bar. So this really kind of, it's such a game changer.
All right, let's shift into these karate combat walls. Have you seen these? I know CJI used them, the Craig Jones.
Yeah. Karate combat, they got some cool fights.
Yeah, so slant board training is a big part of the nervous system training, but for anyone out there who's looking at these tournaments or trying to train to accommodate these walls, how can you use slant board training, and what else would you keep in mind to best prepare yourself for this specific dynamic environment?
No. So now, as far as the walls, I personally don't like the walls. I think that's a big hazard, when it comes to like the athlete, but they want to prevent wall work of some kind. So I would say just doing basic slant board trainings, basic slant board balance training will have a lot of aid, because one, your feet will understand how to position itself differently, like at an imperfect angle, that has a ton of leverage. So you'll feel more comfortable. Maybe if you want to work on the wall, run across, whatever it is, whatever chaos you find yourself trying to create order through, That will really help. And I mean, it's an okay idea. Now that I'm looking at it, it's kind of interesting that they're incorporating grappling with it, because I kind of prefer some of the outcomes. Like, this is a little bit more engaging than the cage, because the cage is such a hard stop and it's a 90-degree angle that guys can get pinned into like the bottom intersection between the floor and the wall, right? And that can slow down action, that can reduce opportunities of escape. This seems like there's a little bit more opportunity for movement, creating space and action, which is cool. Like, I don't mind that. The only thing I don't like about it is that if, say, someone backs up into a wall, you easily just fall into the wall, and you're kind of like, you're not really in a good spot to do anything about it. If there was a cage there, you can do wall work. You have defenses. That guy friggin' did a jump off the wall. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So I guess now, like, looking at this, how it's applied, guys are probably trying to use this wall as another way to deliver force. Yeah. Jumping off the wall, it creates a lot more dynamics, which is cool. It creates like more opportunity for techniques. So yeah, I would say get good at balancing on the slant boards. That will probably really help you, even just working with the SuperCat. But it would be weird. You wouldn't be able to do plyometrics on an incline at like standing sideways on it, because that's going to put too much shearing forces on ligaments that aren't designed to take huge eccentric over. Like let's say if you take like the slant board on the bottom of the SuperCat and turn it sideways and had someone do squat jumps, that might be too an aggressive angle on some of those tendons and ligaments that aren't designed to take that kind of force.
Yeah. I personally love the walls. Especially for grappling, since usually the alternative is just a flat mat where you reset to the middle and there's a whole stop in the action, and it's just sort of an unnatural sequence. But I like how, like you said, if you get pinned against the wall, you're in a bad position. So that's kind of a downside, but at the same time, it incentivizes you pushing forward, which I think always makes it more interesting. I'm as soon as there's a tournament that has these walls that I have access to, I'm signing up.
Yeah. Looking at this now and kind of seeing how people are getting creative with it, I think there should be both. Like slanted and unslanted, like barriers. That'll only open the door for more creativity, more techniques, and more entertainment. So, yeah, I'm about it. I think it's cool. I like it. Like how this guy kind of utilizes the wall. And you can still grapple with that wall. Like, it still creates a little bit of leverage for some grappling action, too.
Yeah, it's that triangle I was showing earlier with Craig Jones, how he hit it on the wall. That was pretty cool. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. And a well-trained nervous system trained athlete should be able to adjust to these things much faster than someone who's doing straight pattern movements more.
Yeah. If you have a finely tuned nervous system, especially if you look at this guy, see how his forefeet are always meeting the wall first, to create points of leverage. Like if you were doing a lot of nervous system training, like weird improvised movements, weird expressions and movements will just get enhanced. And then you can see that also opens the door for a new style of techniques to start developing, because people don't really think about it. Like, wall work is not jiu-jitsu. Like, wall work is not wrestling. Wall work is almost its own martial art. Right. And it's created like this weird these like subsystems of technique work, to work with the wall. Now with this, it could create a whole new subsystems of techniques you can start to mess around with, play with, and create cool, entertaining movements out of, cool expressions.
Yeah, I think it's a cool innovation. I'm glad that it's picking up popularity. All right, so one thing I've been wondering about is when you're training, you've trained a lot of different athletes. You mentioned hockey earlier, but just focusing in on the martial arts, what are some of the differences that you would program for with a boxer, with a kickboxer, and a grappler? What are some different areas you'd emphasize for those different disciplines?
All right, so that's a good question. So of course, depending on the goal, that's going to come first, and then once I have an idea of the goal, then I'll start to structure Well, what's going to be the biggest change is their cardio development. That's going to be easily the biggest change, because each combat sport, like, there's a lot of ideas where people are just doing general cardio training. Like a boxer is doing the same type of cardio training as an MMA fighter. Or you'll see MMA fighters doing lots of road work, because it comes from like combat sports culture, which is something is like not a really effective way to train your aerobic base for MMA, because, well, I don't even think it's a really effective way to train your aerobic base for any combat sport personally, but it's not a terrible way. It's just not very effective, and it's cheap, because fighters are always poor, so they're always looking for cheap, simple things that they can do. But like, say for example, like MMA and boxing, you compare the two energy systems. Like boxing is like 80% aerobic, I think, 20% anaerobic. It's more similar to basketball, because like you're only exploding out of like your arms, right? You're not like exploding like with your legs or doing double. You're not doing very heavy anaerobic explosive movements that require the whole kinetic chain. Unlike MMA, where like a wrestling shot is a totally different energy system, a totally different sequence of the amount of muscles and limbs that you need to execute that movement, compared to just throwing like a 3-piece combination, right? So like MMA is more, I think it's 90%, or like maybe 80%. I think it's the opposite. I think it's like 80% anaerobic, 20% aerobic. And because most of the time athletes they're not aerobically recovering like boxers, where they're getting on their bike and they're moving. Some are, but a lot of the times MMA fighters, they rest after a huge anaerobic explosion. Like it's like this unspoken agreement where both of them clash. They go through anaerobic threshold on a takedown, and then someone gets it, and then there's just they stop for a second. They're like, and you can see them breathing. And they both like take a second to like redevelop their cardio for the next explosive movement. Like boxing, that never occurs. Same with basketball. Basketball it's steady. It keeps going. You'll have weird explosive movements. As soon as they score, you run back down to the court. So I would design their cardio program to meet what their sports requirement is. So an MMA fighter is doing a very different cardio program than, say, a boxer. A boxer is doing a very different cardio program, say, compared to a Muay Thai fighter. And you can look this up. There's websites that have their lactic to alactic threshold differences. You can just search it up, and that's what I would do. I just go on the internet. I go, like, if it's a new sport, like I was working with a fencer once, and I'm like how the fuck? Like, okay, like, so I have to watch some fencing matches, time their explosive movement, time the amount of rest. Like, okay, they usually do about 10 to 12 seconds of insane speed work, followed by like a 60-second rest period for the next round. But they may do like 30 of those in a tournament. So they're football is very similar output. It's like 3 to 8 seconds of high explosive movement, followed by like 2 minutes of rest. So there will be similar structures. Like aerobic base building is a very important thing for every athlete. You do need aerobic base building, but a lot of times athletes will just do aerobic base building. They won't do very specific things. They won't do very specific outbursts. And like, say for an MMA fighter, well, I would have them do something like, say we get on like the row machine. We run some tests, figure out where their VO2 max is, figure out where their zones are. I want to get a look at their mental stamina and their weaknesses, how their kinetic chain breaks down under fatigue, because that's a huge element. Kinetic breakdown will, like, your technique will break down with it. There's a phrase that says cardio makes cowards of us all. Like, if you lose your cardio, you go into freeze or flight mode. You start retreating. Your fight mode will get deactivated. So you need to have that stamina. And then after we got the tests, I know where their zones are, then we'll start to program a cardio training based on, their schedule, what they can do, what their other training camp is looking like, so we don't overtrain. So we do a lot more things like, say if we're getting really fight specific, right, for an MMA fighter, like we would do a 5-minute round, like say like on the row machine, right? And I would try to have him max out his heart rate, all the way to the red zone, right? And then I would teach him how to calm down and relax and cruise to get him back to the green zone, get him back into zone 2. As soon as it hits zone 2, going all the way to the red again, and they're ripping that row machine as hard as they can, right? And then teach them to breathe. Every time you exhale, it sends a signal to your heart to get lowered. So teach them how to breathe properly, how to calm themselves down, how to get the heart rate down. That's what's key. Got to teach them to get that heart rate down, because if it stays at the red, right, breathing starts to lock up. They start to panic. Neurological control starts to break down. Neuromuscular fatigue falls apart. So I got to teach them, like, hey, spike it, learn to calm yourself down, get the heart rate down. So I'm trying to spike it and get as many spikes as I can in a 5-minute period. Now, maybe the first time we don't get a lot. Maybe they can only get like 2 solid spikes per minute. Maybe if they're really struggling. But I want to see, like, okay, does their heart rate get down really well? Does it have trouble getting up? This is going to give me ideas where we need to make improvements. So if let's say they can get their heart rate really low, but they have trouble getting it to like 190, 200, like the spikes that come like really slow, we got to do more sprints. We need more anaerobic explosive tissue. We need the circulatory and the respiratory system more adapted to get that VO2 threshold. We got to really push it. So we're going to do things that are more intense on a regular basis. Let's say they can spike it, no problem, but it has trouble getting back down. Then we're probably going to do something a little different. Maybe we're going to start having like the anaerobic phase. We'll do circuit training. It's going to be 30 seconds. And then they're going to get a longer break so they can practice trying to get their heart rate down. So we're hitting more of aerobic threshold building, because that's showing that their circulatory system isn't supplying blood to the body fast enough. The heart is like overworking. So it could be the heart tissue isn't very well developed. It could be the respiratory system isn't very strong. Like they're breathing, their diaphragm might not have the strength to pull in enough air to resupply the blood cells with oxygen. So there's all these little things, like their Krebs cycle, maybe. Like there's all these little things that I'm going to test and try to collect data. So you got sport-specific movements, sport-specific cardio, depending on the combat sport, and then you also have the athlete's natural deficiencies based on, genetics or whatever the hell. And some of it could be like a severe weakness in the body. Like you have, like I had a fighter who had he broke his foot a long time ago, never rehabbed it properly. And I was noticing when he jumped, like one foot would collapse, the other one wouldn't. And I looked at his calves. One calf was kind of smooth, and the other one was nice and hard and like defined. And then that's when I was like, okay, this doesn't matter how much cardio training we do, until we fix this, you'll never be operating your cardio at 100%. There's 2 things. One, the calf is your secondary heart. The calf literally pushes blood back up the body like a sub pump. So if that's not properly developed, like you're working with like a 1.5 sub pumps instead of 2 good sub pumps that resupply. Another thing is that the kinetic energy isn't recoiling through that limb very well. So that means he's got to push more out of his quad or his hip or whatever to try to force action to happen better, that the calf and the foot are not doing very well for him. That could zap your cardio too. It'll lead to neuromuscular breakdown, neurological fatigue, and injury. So there's so many different elements that can contribute to what's going on with their cardio and how to develop their cardio. And then taking it like a step further, like for boxers, we're going to be training more hand speed, more ballistic movements, more quickness out of the hands, more hand-eye coordination, more footwork. They need lots and lots of footwork. They need to be able to throw like maybe 1,000 punches, in a single fight. And if their body doesn't know how to throw 1,000 punches efficiently, they're never going to want to push the pace of the fight, because their nervous system knows we don't have that information on our data file. So we're not going to go to the realms of chaos. Your nervous system does not want to go there. It has to go there first to feel it, to know that it can do it, like stretching. Like your nervous system will stop you from accessing ranges of motion until you access them enough times that it trusts it now. With an MMA fighter, we're going to be doing way more work with like explosive movements, because there's a grappling element. So we're going to want to mix, a lot of striking with very heavy plyometric explosive movements from the hip through the back, through the legs. So generally their training camp will be similar. The cardio will branch off differently. And then they're going to run through like the initial phase of the nervous system training, ball work, balance, all that's going to be the same. Once we get into the secondary phase, This is where we're going to start changing things up. The speed and agility is going to be more customizable for them. You know, the strength work is going to be more custom. I'm probably going to work a little bit more on the power side with the MMA fighter than with the boxer. You know, and then when we get closer to the fight, that's when things get really sports specific. You know, the boxer is going to do like, you know, lots of circuit training with the arms. You know, like speed punches for like 10 seconds, switch over, you know, doing like icky shuffle on agility ladder as fast as possible, then switch. Things that are very boxing related, right? That's we're simulating the fight. We're simulating the demand. And then with the MMA fighter, we may hit the footwork the same, but then we'll go right into like a big power movement for 10 seconds, go right back to the footwork, then the power, then the hand speed, then the power again. You know, you see how I'm trying to duplicate this same type of stimulus that their body's going to experience according to their sports demand.
Yeah, super interesting. When I asked that question, I thought you were going to talk about the hand speed of the boxers and the legs of MMA, you know, but it was interesting that you started with the heart rate. That was, I mean, that's when you say it, it makes perfect sense, but starting with the specificity of the anaerobic/aerobic demands, that makes sense. It's cool.
Yeah, and you'll see that because you'll see one area where I see a lot of strength coaches neglecting, and it maybe could be, you know, maybe lack of experience. They don't know what the fight feels like, you know, so they're not exactly getting as creative as they could be. It could be time. Maybe their business isn't set up with the proper amount of sessions for the athlete based on, you know, a bunch of different factors: income of the fighter, rental space of the trainer, you know, like, because they're independents. But I see a lot of coaches neglecting these ideas for one reason or another. And these areas are more important than just, say, like developing hand speed and power. I'll take cardio development over all of that shit. Because if you don't have the cardio, you'll never get the opportunity to express all that power and speed you even trained. Right? It starts with the cardio. All combat sports. You know, there's a direct correlation with cardio and your own confidence. And you'll see certain fighters that neglect their cardio training, or they're a little bit more lax, like Donald Cerrone. It's a clear example of that. Lovely guy, one of my favorite fighters ever. But Cowboy has a huge problem with discipline. A big problem with discipline. He needs more chaos in his training camp to feel normal. But as you get older, that works against you. You know, so he's like, oh, he's been drinking beer. He's been doing stuff on the ranch. He's not hitting all his cardio. He towards the end of his career, he started getting worse. One, because of age, and two, because he was taking too much control of his own camp. That's a very bad thing to do. If you're a fighter, you do not want control of your camp, because you're always going to lean towards your strengths and shy away from your weaknesses. And so if you've never pushed yourself to hit those capacities, those training capacities, those anaerobic thresholds, doing all those different things, your nervous system is going to know on a subconscious level that you don't have the mechanisms built in to withstand this upcoming challenge. You don't have the evidence to support your confidence. Now a lot of fighters will develop a false set of confidence. You know, like they'll have a lot of bravado. Like Conor McGregor is a perfect example. Everything about Conor McGregor's the way he dresses, the way he talks shit, his flamboyancy, his grandiosity to him, it's all to compensate for his lack of cardio development. All of it. And it's clear as day if you look at the way he fights and you look at where he does well. Everything he's doing is trying to reinforce his ego to compensate for his lack of cardio development. Because as soon as his cardio crumbles, all the bravado and all the confidence literally falls apart like a house of cards. That is the source of his narcissism, is his cardio. It's false confidence. And you saw that with Khabib. As soon as his cardio started to fade, he literally started to negotiate with Khabib in the cage. Like, it's all business. Wouldn't even look at him, you know? He just folded like a cake. Just folded. So whenever I see an athlete that's real, the only athlete that doesn't have this, that's really grandiose, but he has it for a different reason, was the king of cringe, Triple C. You know Triple C from the UFC, a little short guy? So cringy. Yes, Henry Cejudo. Great fighter. Really cool fighter. He's cooler now. I think he's been doing DMT and shit or some mushrooms, and he's gotten cooler. You know, he's
been hanging out with Mike Tyson.
Right, he's been hanging out with Mike Tyson. His ego's dissolved. He's a much more likable guy. But when he was competing, oh my God, he was so cringy. You know, like just embarrassing. But he's short. You know, he's got, like, I think that's where it comes from. Because he obviously has cardio that's world class, beyond world class cardio. You know, so, but generally speaking, whenever I see fighters act like that, I'm either thinking two things. One, they don't have the cardio to back up their confidence, or there's something about their physicality that makes them feel insecure. And it could be both at the same time.
Yeah, we've talked about emotional drive in previous episodes, but I would assume there's a correlation between cardiovascular conditioning and emotional drive.
Yeah, 100%.
Sweet. Well, we can wrap there for today, Quintin. Anyone who's listening, if you've made it this far, you're definitely the type of person that should be subscribing, joining the nervous system training community, of course, and then send your questions to nervoussystemtrainingpodcast@gmail.com or nervous system training podcast on Instagram.
Yeah. Or comments on YouTube. If you got questions, we're checking the comments. Yeah. We're happy to give you, any sauce that you need.
Yeah, for sure. We're seeing everything that you guys throw at us. All right. Till next week.
All right.